Where do the stars play? Where do the stars play? They play among the shadows fallen far away. Oh, the shadows fallen far away. Hello everyone, welcome to Musing, music for the adventurous listener, heard here on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary and on all major podcast platforms. Today on the program, I am in conversation with the composer and sound designer extraordinaire, Carmen Braden, who will give us a behind-the-scenes look at an extraordinary multi-genre and multi-nation theatre production that will be premiered across the Northwest Territories in the coming weeks. Kiuryak is an immersive circumpolar theatre performance that explores our relationship with the Northern Lights. Kiuryak means Aurora Borealis in the Western Arctic Inuvialuit language of Inuvialuktun in reference to their bright colors. This is a multidisciplinary piece created in collaboration with artists from the Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada, Greenland, Sami Territory, and Alaska. So hello, Carmen. Welcome back to Musing. It's really great to be in conversation today. So let's dive right in because we are talking about your latest and maybe perhaps greatest project that will be in full Technicolor in person for the benefit of Yellowknife audiences in the coming weeks. Tell us about your theater production, Kiuryak.
That's an Inuvialuktun word from, if you go straight north of Yellowknife, you hit the Arctic Ocean, and the Inuit group that is from there is called the Inuvialuit. Mm-hmm. And so that word, Kiuryak, it means Northern Lights in that language.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so tell me about the inspiration and concept for this piece.
The origins of it were from two of the main theater groups that have partnered together. One is called Thea Turtle, which is run by Alon Nashman, who is a fantastic theater worker. He's an actor, he's a playwright, he's a director out of Toronto. And he had seen a production of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen, and it had live strings in it and was really inspired by this. So he was talking to a colleague of his, who is a longtime colleague and friend of mine, Renalta Arluk, with her theater company called Akpik Theater. And she's originally from the Northwest Territories, and she's originally from that area that I mentioned, far north of Yellowknife. And they, through their discussions of this idea of how do we maybe make something kind of Canadian based out of this idea of live storytelling and live music on stage, and it evolved into this circumpolar new work that has the aurora as its core story. And because the aurora is something that all circumpolar countries have as part of their skyscape, and there are very fascinating similarities within many northern cultures about the aurora, but there's also really interesting differences as well. And then, of course, there's scientific ideas and information that have come to light. And then, of course, there's the big tourism trade that's kind of grown up around the aurora. So this theater piece uses the aurora to tell a really human story that's connected in northern Canada. Every once in a while, something happens that connects it to northern Sweden and Norway and the Sami cultures there, or different parts of the human experience with this natural phenomenon in the story, which is the telling of two kind of siblings who were separated, and the aurora is kind of a way that they find each other again.
Spoiler alert. Can we dive a bit more into the community collaborations and the Indigenous populations coming together to inform this project and collaborate on it?
So this was an important part of the whole process, was making not just one culture story or one person's story, but bringing in collaborators and doing what Renalta calls, and I love this title, durational work. And so this is not something that has been rushed. This has been on my project list for years now. And we've worked on it in 5 different provinces and territories. And like one example was when one of the early workshop times was a writing time, but also aurora photography time. They were trying to capture some of the beautiful photos and videos of the aurora. So some of the creative collaborators came to Yellowknife and went out on the ice roads and into the bush with filmmakers to try and do some of this capturing when the aurora was out, but then also met with an Indigenous knowledge keeper, language keeper, storyteller from the Satu region in the Northwest Territories, kind of halfway between Yellowknife and the coast where Great Bear Lake is. They met with a tour operator who runs aurora tours. They did work to connect with different people in the community to get their stories about it. And thinking back on it now, looking at the script, looking at how the story's lens shifts around this idea, all of these things kind of are entwined within it. So that's been really special. Language is a big focus in some of this. There's been connections through the Sapmi language. We have Greenlandic actor who has been part of the collaboration process as well. And so the languages and the stories about the Northern Lights has been a part of this throughout.
Amazing. And which languages are spoken throughout or sung in, or are there aspects of that language that people will be able to take in the production?
The script's in English, so English speakers will be tied to this one. One of the moments that I could highlight is there's a Sami yoic, the kind of singing that they do. It's not yodeling, but it's not with words. It's kind of wordless singing that's quite kind of light and really filigree-ish and beautiful. When I was learning about these yoics, they're very interesting and special songs that are very personal for people. So you might make a yoic for somebody. Like one person might make a yoic for another person, and that's their yoic that they're given, this song that's really kind of connected to them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so like having these different musical ideas come into play was really special for me.
Pretty showed me the way it looked in the night. Under the lights, under the lights. Took it home, memory of that pretty. It was harder what you showed me, the truth of the words, weighing me down, weighing me down. Can't unknow the things you showed me. To safe places I used to know, to safe places I used to go. After you and I, after you and I, after you and I, after you and I.
go about, like you mentioned that this has been a long-term project. I always say good things take time to cook. But how did you go about getting kind of community buy-in and selling the collaborative aspect of this project, which is so central to it, across so many different communities?
I would say the strength of the creative and technical team that has been behind this has helped with that a lot. It has a very long and well-respected track record nationally and locally of doing work that is groundbreaking and brings together people and tells stories that I think really need to be heard. And Alon's work, which has been very Toronto centered for a long time, has given us a lot of depth and grounding. His company is one of the main producers of the show. And so through connections with both of those works and some of my own musical ones, this project has done residency work with Geordie Theatre in Montreal, the Banff Centre during one of the Banff International String Quartet Festival. We were there at the Chan Centre for the Arts in the Yukon during the Adaka Festival. So there's been other places in Canada that we've tied this to that have, I think, seen the strength of the people involved and put a lot of trust in that, which I've been really grateful to be a part of and lend my own kind of connections and support to through that. And Yellowknife is the big one, like having this premiere happen here in the NWT. Like I've built my career out of here, and so it's been easy in some ways to help support the project from there. Renalta has a long track record with a theater that's going to be premiering it here, which tours beyond Yellowknife. It's going to be a Yellowknife audience, which will be the premiere. But then it's planning to tour to 5 of the smaller communities in the Northwest Territories, which is Herculean feat. It is like Hercules-ish. It is a lot of work to get to other places in this big territory. And I think the strength of our team is speaking to that, which is awesome.
You already mentioned Herculean, but what are some of the other challenges in the realization of this project, whether that be technical difficulties in a practical sense or creative differences or issues with cultural things? Just for those that are kind of starting up on this path of Indigenous collaboration and community work of this scale, what kinds of things did you encounter?
One of the priorities of the ACPIC Theatre in particular, which is something I've really grown to respect, is they prioritize going into what we would call communities. So smaller centers that don't have as full or as active an art scene as some of the bigger centers, and going in there in a way that engages with the community in a really respectful way. It doesn't just kind of parachute in, deliver art that they think people should see, and then leave. There's a process that Renalta's company has developed called Protocol and Play, that they've spent a lot of time developing this protocol, this process of going into community and doing that respectfully. So when this project decided to have 2 visions of how it would land in front of an audience, having those move forward at the same time has been one of the biggest challenges and most interesting kind of creative responses that I've been part of in my career. So to have something that has, like, I don't want to say 3 very intricate projection, like it uses a lot of projection. There's a curved screen. There's part of the set is kind of projected on from reverse and illuminated in this really dynamic way. And it changes, like projection mapping, where like a piece of structure, a live physical structure, something like this, the projector is like mapped to that and projected onto that in a way that's really cool. And then having that, and then having live strings on stage, having live actors with kind of microphones and a sound system that's really intricate, a soundscape that's played separately, building this, what might be considered like the big theater version, and then being able to scale that down to a version that could go into a community gym or a rec center or a friendship center in a community of like 1,000 to 1,500, and still have the same kind of impact, kind of scope that it does in a soft seat 800 seat theater. Being able to like run those 2 trains at the same time has been really fun, but not easy.
Can you just set the scene for us a bit more, what the full production involves, and then versus what the smaller scale production would involve?
So in all of the versions, there's going to be 3 actors on the stage and a set that includes kind of a tent that people have in the bush up here a lot called a wall tent, kind of a small canvas frame one. There's going to be some other smaller set pieces, but pretty minimal set design that stays put. The kind of way that the set and the visuals are really brought to life is through projection. And so having this curved screen that gets like some of this incredible aurora footage gets put up there. This is definitely not like a tourism commercial. This is a human story. And so the visual designers have taken lots of work. There's animation that appears. There's kind of scientific looking graphics that happen. There's cityscapes that bring us back down into southern cities. That will happen in all of the spaces. The strings will be kind of right on the stage. And sometimes they'll be kind of illuminated and other times they'll be behind a kind of a screen. So they can become a bit of the world and then not. And the way I've built the score has them interact when there are live string players happening in a couple moments on the stage in a quasi-improvised kind of way. And then I built a sound design that happens through speakers all the time. So when this thing gets scaled down and gets on a small plane and flies up to like Inuvik, which is right on the like close to the Arctic Ocean in the delta of the Mackenzie River, there's no strings and their music comes now through the speakers along with the sound design I've built, like sounds of wind or animals or buses, things like that, kind of what you might think of like Foley sound effects. And so that their music becomes now kind of in the speaker system and the actors are there and the projectors, everything kind of gets smaller, mostly because of the venue limitations, places that don't have lighting racks and things like that. And one thing that I know happens on these tours is that sometimes something breaks or something doesn't work quite right. And then they have to adapt that, knowing that there's usually going to be the core elements of the music that will tie it together, the sound design, the actors, and hopefully part of the set and the projector that will be able to come to life, even as you would need to adapt things. So one of our initial ideas, for example, was in March in Yellowknife, there's a snow festival called the Snow Kings Winter Festival, where they build a castle out of snow every year on the lake, and then it melts in the spring and they build it again the next winter. But it's basically like a big blank white canvas wall. So it's like perfect projector spot. So one of our ideas was, could this piece happen in that kind of a setting? And how would you make that happen? Because string players really don't like playing their instruments when it's really cold.
String instruments don't like playing when it's really cold.
It's kind of anathema to them. I've learned it's not even worth broaching the question. Except when you can get like a nice carbon fiber cello. Then the cellists are usually like, I'll get like some cut off gloves and it'll be no problem.
That's right. Well, I took a carbon fiber to Burning Man and it survived the desert.
Right. I've toured in the north with very good cellists with very, very nice cellos, and I don't really like doing that anymore. I don't have the like nervous system that can handle their nervous systems anymore.
Yeah, this life on the edge for real.
In those circumstances, the music still happens and it sounds gorgeous, because it was recorded by the same quartet that's going to premiere it and that helped us workshop it in Banff, they were there for the String Quartet Festival. And I'm really proud of kind of the quality of the content and also musically, for sure, the quality of what we have prepared for a live version and for a recorded version.
Mm-hmm, so that the impact won't be lost. Tell me about your role coming in as sound designer, composer. What other hats do you wear?
I guess there's two others right now for this part of the project. It would be musical director. So once
Okay.
in a while, the actors do something musical. There's some singing that happens. So I get to get my hands dirty with that. And then because this is happening in my hometown, where I have like cars and stuff like that, and friends, and I know the place and I've built my life here. So I'm kind of working right now as the rough tour manager for the Yellowknife portion. And the theater that is hosting us is called the Northern Arts and Cultural Center. And this premiere is going to be their first show of the season. They have a season built throughout the year, and this is going to be their first big show. And then they take over the tour as it travels, which is something they do every year.
So at what point did you come onto the scene? Were you there right from the beginning or to help build the production or?
I think I was there pretty early on. I think once these kind of two main writers and producers, Renalta and Alon, knew that they wanted to have live strings on stage, I got a phone call from Renalta, who I've worked with before as a sound designer, specifically, less musical composer. So in Stratford and at the National Arts Centre, I've done work on some of her plays. And then most recently, an Indigenous adaptation of a Shakespeare play that's toured several times in Canada now. So we have a history of working together in sound design. And she knew that I write music for stage and music for instruments. I was really excited about that because sound design is pretty fascinating stuff. But for the most part, it has not been a huge, heavy music, what I would call the musical component. So the fact that this one, they essentially dangled this idea in front of me that the music would be a big element to the storytelling and it would be a part of the storytelling way, not just kind of this underscoring. And so there are moments when the strings play alone and bring some ideas to life. So here's an interesting thought, Janna. I had not thought of this one in a while. When I was young, I swore I would never write music about the aurora for, I guess, two reasons. One was I didn't want to, as a northerner who was a composer, I didn't want to be pigeonholed into all of the northern stereotype trope ideas. I focused on ice. I did a lot of ice things. Ice is fairly, not universal, but there's ice in a lot of places. But I didn't want to have my Aurora Symphony and my Aurora String Quartet. I wanted to kind of keep that a little at distance, but also it's a very amazing, powerful, and what I would consider a spiritual element in my world. And I didn't feel like I could do it justice, or I could not equal what it was in music. And so I didn't want to attempt it even. And I think in this project, having so many other collaborators involved from so many different cultures and places, and each of us bringing our own offerings, it felt like if I was to bring something here to this, it would be one part of a bigger whole. And then like that kind of a response or a reflection of this part of something that's been my life that I felt ready for.
That's really interesting that you had this connection and almost like aversion, but now it's like we grow up.
Yeah, I think it was a part of the maturing compositional life and also a trust in the people that was around me and a really relaxed process. Because it has happened over so many years, I've been able to like write the music or like write sketches, work on it, and then shelve it for a while, knowing that I would get a chance to kind of marinate on it, just let it rest, and then come back and bring it to life again, revise it, get the feedback from other creators on it, which is not something actually a lot of professional composers get.
Yes, a vulnerable place to put yourself in.
Yeah, and the fact that other collaborators would be not necessarily musical backgrounds, but like very strong and experienced reactions to this live performance elements, that I was ready to also put my trust in them for that.
And it's what context required of you. That's pushed you maybe a little bit. think people attending and taking this in will experience and take away from being a part of this work, the premiere of it?
I think the human stories that we see will be relatable to many people. It's not just telling the story of people from one culture or from one experience. Like there's plans for this to be performed in southern Canada. There's plans for this to be performed in Scandinavia. And so I think an audience member who has a lot of experience with the aurora will take away something very different than somebody who doesn't. But what this work does in a really gentle and beautiful but quite profound way is going to not leave anybody out. Like there's moments with scientific language that is all about how the world of science and solar particles and the magnetic ionosphere in all those different ways that we know charge the ions that make these beautiful lights, but we don't really understand them or how to predict them, or sometimes they influence our lives and our technology. Those moments happen. There's moments of family and connection, disconnection, and connections to like a Canadian history. The siblings that are kind of separated in this story, their story and their family's story is echoed even in the people who are in the room creating it, in how colonization has affected people's lives in Canada, and Indigenous people, Inuit people, how it's continuing to affect them. And it's very contemporary. Social media shows up in this. And so I think people will see themselves in some element of this. And through that kind of breadth of scope that this project is going towards, they will then we'll get their little hearts in the door to be able to show them all the other kinds of elements that we're bringing that encounter the aurora, if that makes sense.
That's beautiful.
And also they'll see some deadly aurora footage. They'll see some fantastic acting from some pretty young players. It's very cool. And then of course the strings are going to sound so deadly for the live audiences too. This is what I'm so excited for that.
And I'm so thrilled that I will have the opportunity to take it in live, and I can't wait to tell everyone about it and be the recipient of years of thoughtful, beautiful collaborations. I find that really moving and amazing. Carmen Braden, thank you so much for coming on Musing and telling us about this production.
This has been Musing on CJSW 90.9 FM in Calgary. I'm your host, Janna Sailor. Thanks so much for joining me for this celebration of music, creators, and ideas. Musing is a production of the Canadian Music Centre Prairie Region and is heard right here in Calgary and on all major podcast platforms. As we end our time together, we recognize that there are more than 630 First Nations communities across the lands that we now know of as Canada, representing 50 distinct nations and Indigenous languages. In addition, there are Métis in every province of the country and 53 Inuit communities speaking different dialects of Inuktitut across the north. We acknowledge them as the original music makers, dancers, creators, and caretakers of our lands, and they continue to inspire and teach us as we commit to learning and moving forward together. Never whistle at the Northern Lights. They will come down and get you. They will play soccer with your head. They are also your ancestors, calling you home. I will leave you now with more music from Kiuryak, the Northern Lights.